now. Okay.
Jama 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 aunisu jama 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 aunisu jama 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 aunisu jama 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 aunisu adan dem ni koina wa indem ni koina kelentete adan dem ni koina wa
Hello and welcome to the launch of UNICEF report titled Seen, Counted, Included, and of the Center of Excellence or Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities. My name is UNICEF and I am a member of Commonwealth Children and Youth Disability Network, and I am also a youth disability advocate as well as a journalist from Nairobi, Kenya, and I will be your moderator for the day. So I would like to start by thanking you all for taking time to join us today and celebrate this milestone. We do not take it for granted. Data are a critical tool to ensuring the rights of children with disabilities. And I would like to kickstart this event sharing a video that reminds us all of the important and reasons we are here today.
Data on disability is important because it serves as a guide on what we as a people should do.
मेरे
ख्याल में डाटा चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटीज़ का इकट्ठा करना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि जब तक हमारे पास डेटा नहीं होगा हमें आइडिया नहीं हो सकेगा गवर्नमेंट को, NGOs को, कि उन्होंने किस पॉपुलेशन के लिए काम करना है, कि वो लोग कितने हैं। तो डाटा एक बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट है। इसके अलावा हमें जब रिसोर्सेज उनके लिए इकट्ठे करने हैं चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटीज़ के लिए, तो जब तक हमें नंबर्स का नहीं पता चलेगा तब तक हम उनके लिए बजट और रिसोर्सेज को एलोकेट नहीं कर सकेंगे। सो ये बुनियादी इम्पोर्टेंस है कि चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटीज़ का डेटा होना चाहिए।
Mbola mazava izay hoe voahitika satria fieritreretan'ny olona hoe raha manana fahasembanana izay ohatra ara-pahitana dia ny aminay rehetra no mijanona eo. Anefa tiako fantatritsika rehetra fa izay afaka manao manatanteraka nofinofy sy ny tany izay mitovy amin'ny ankizy rehetra. Ho an'ny fiarahamonina, ny tompony andraikitra, ny manam-pahefana, indrindra fa ny ray aman-dreny fa ny riana isan-tahitaponay rehetra sy nofinofy indrindra ny tanjona misy eo aminay satria raha pitsika izahay dia afaka miaina ohatra ny olona rehetra, afaka manana ho avy mamiratra, indrindra afaka manampy koa raha pitsika amin'ny nofinofinay sy ny tanjonay tsy mampiavaka sy hanananay ho avy mamiratra.
Hi, my name is Kibe from Kenya and I'm a young person with a disability. Children with disabilities in the disability space can effectively influence the program or effectively and efficiently developing the program to disability. Without proper programming, children with disabilities are left more vulnerable as existing causes of vulnerabilities are not covered.
It helps in preventing barriers these children face if they have education and community space. It also helps in monitoring the progress and effectiveness of the programs rolled out to empower these children. It also helps in fostering full inclusion in the society by proper allocation of resources to support the development of these children.
The messages in the video are a reminder of the real world impact that data can have on the lives of children and youth with disabilities, and why it is so important to strengthen the availability of robust and relevant statistics. As we go through today's event, we will hear from many presenters and panelists about various efforts that have been put in place to address the need of high quality data. But first, we would like to hear from you on what you think are the main barriers impacting the availability and the quality of robust and relevant data on children with disabilities. Please follow the link on the chat box and your thoughts in the Menti text box, which will be active throughout the webinar. All right, now I would like to invite Mr. Omar Abdi, Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, to share some opening remarks. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Mumo. Good morning, afternoon, evening, colleagues, partners. It is my pleasure to welcome you all today to the launch of the Global Report on Children with Disabilities and Center of Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities. UNICEF joins you all to build a world where children with disabilities reach full potential, growing up healthy, educated, protected from harm, heard, and engaged in their communities. This is central to our mission to realize the rights of every child. Addressing the issue of invisibility of children with disabilities and promoting their full participation are critical steps towards advancing their rights. They must be visible in the classrooms, on the streets, in the media, in public policy and legislation. Most importantly, their voices must be at the center of any decision about their lives. The rights of children with disabilities are clearly defined in the 2006 Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that has been ratified by more than 180 countries. In 2015, the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals was framed under the pledge of leaving no one behind. The SDGs call for a concerted commitment to ensure that all the 17 goals are met for all nations and for all segments of society, and called for reliable and disaggregated data on which to act and with which to measure progress. Over the last several years, UNICEF and partners have taken many activities to address the need for comparable and reliable data on children with disabilities. In these efforts, we've been guided by a simple yet powerful principle. All children count and have the right to be counted. The report we are launching today marks a pivot moment. For the first time, rich global data on children with disabilities offer a glimpse into their widely diverse experiences. The data provide the foundation for understanding who these children are and the scope and depth of the deprivation they face. The picture that emerges is not a happy one. Compared with just children without disabilities, children with disabilities are 34% more likely to be stunted, 47% more likely to be out of primary school, and 20% less likely to have expectations of a better life. These data are a wake-up call. What we have done is not enough, but these data are also a first step. When children with disabilities are seen and counted, they are no longer invisible. When put to use through advocacy and enforced transformative policies and programs, these data have the power to change lives. In UNICEF, we're currently preparing an organization-wide disability inclusion policy and strategy. This strategy is inspired by the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and also guided by the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy and directed to the implementation of the UNICEF 2022-2025 strategic plan. Our disabilities policy and strategy is expected to guide our work on disability inclusion over the next decade and beyond, covering our programs, operations, and culture for and with children, youth, and adults with disabilities all over the world. Data will continue to play a key role in guiding our work, but strengthening the availability and quality of data is a shared responsibility. We are committed to working with governments and civil society organizations to strengthen national data systems and develop skills and capacity to generate relevant data analysis and ensure this knowledge is used. We are very grateful to the many partners who have worked tirelessly with us over the years to foster inclusion of children with disabilities through data and action. In particular, the International Disability Alliance, the International Disability Consortium, the Global Action on Disability Network, the Norwegian Programme for Capacity Development, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia, and Washington Group on Disability Statistics. Let me end with a call to two important actions we all need to take simultaneously. First, we must stop building new barriers in the physical, communication, and information environment. And secondly, we must tear down existing barriers, including those attitudinal that perpetuate exclusion through stigma and discrimination. UNICEF looks forward to continuing to work with member states, sister UN agencies, civil society, and especially organizations of persons with disabilities, so that we give every child everywhere a fair chance and build a more diverse, prosperous, and inclusive world for all. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you to Mr. Abdi for the words of welcome and reflection on the importance of data. So now we are going to the keynote address. And many partners all over the world believe in the importance of data and share a commitment to use data to promote change. And I would like to invite you now to hear the statements.
A very warm Pacific greetings. Our experience is such that for any policy change to be effective and better informed, we need evidence supported by data. We've also found that for children with disabilities, unfortunately, this is not the case. Policy has been either slow or minimal. And we thank, therefore, the initiative by UNICEF, firstly for the report on children with disabilities, and secondly, the launch of this new initiative that will make lives better for children with disabilities, for them to be seen, to be heard, and to be counted. Children with disabilities will no longer be left behind, and we welcome both the report and the initiative from here in the Pacific. Thank you.
Dear participants, honorable guests, I feel honored to greet you today. I would like to thank UNICEF for this opportunity and for the launch of Global Report on Children with Disability and for the launch of Center of Excellence for Data on Children with Disabilities. Availability of reliable data is very important for policymakers, and protection of children's rights and protection of rights of children with disability is especially important for Georgia as the signatory of both Convention on the Right of the Child and Convention of the Person with Disabilities. We have recently approved and enforced two legislations. One, the Code on the Right of the Child of Georgia, and the Law of Georgia on People with Disabilities. Both of these legislations are very important legislations identifying the strategic focus of the policymakers and the country on children and people with disabilities. I would like to thank UNICEF for important contribution to creating reliable data in the country, and MIX survey is one of the examples, and I would like, and I'm sure that we will have the opportunity to continue cooperation and collaboration in ensuring that we have reliable data and our policies are based on the data and they are focused on promotion of inclusion and participation of children with disabilities in the society. Thank you.
On behalf of NORAD, I congratulate you with the launch of the Central Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities. Data is at the core of disability inclusion. Data shows the situation we're facing, what is needed, by whom and where. And data can also inform policy and be evidence of what works and what doesn't work. Data also can form the basis for advocacy and hold duty bearers accountable, whether it be governments, donors, or service providers. The Center for Excellence and the Global Report represents an important step forward in our efforts to leave no one behind and realize the CRPD. So we look forward to charting the road ahead in fulfilling the rights of children with disabilities at the Global Disability Summit that Norway is hosting due February. Again, congratulations.
Thank you to all keynote speakers for taking time to reflect on the importance and needed commitment for data to protect the rights of children with disabilities. I would now like to share a video from Ms. Sun Said, a comedian and a disability advocate.
I'm a writer, comedian, and disability advocate. I also have cerebral palsy, and it is my privilege to be at UNICEF's Fostering Inclusion Through Data event. Did you know that disabled children are 59% more likely than their non-disabled peers to never attend school? They're 42% less likely to have foundational reading and numeracy skills, and 47% more likely to be out of primary school, 33% to be out of lower secondary school, and 27% to be out of upper secondary school. I almost didn't go to school. I was born in the United States of America, and when my parents went to enroll me in the same public school that my 3 older sisters went to, I was denied entry. They wanted to send me to a school for children with Down syndrome. I believe that if my parents hadn't fought to mainstream me, if I didn't have access to a free, equal, and accessible education, that I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I am so proud of UNICEF for collecting this data. Yes, I'm a comedian and data is boring, but data is important. It gives us visibility. It lets us know how many disabled people are out there, how many disabled students need our help to access education, and how many kids' lives can be changed by simply having the support of UNICEF. I hope you enjoy the event, and let's make sure that every child, regardless of ability, has access to an education. Thank you.
Every child has a right to access of education from Maysoon. Many thanks to Maysoon for sharing our story and reflecting on the importance of data for ensuring that children with disabilities can access education. May's stories is an excellent reminder that all children have the right to learn and that inclusive education is fundamental, ensuring that children with disabilities enjoy equal opportunities. Now, let's hear from a few stakeholders around the world on the value of inclusive education.
Data collection on children with disabilities helps the country to plan in order to improve the conditions of these children, thereby addressing their specific needs. The Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary School Education has been very instrumental in collecting data on children with special needs. As a school, data enables us to keep track of our enrollment and dropout rate. With data, we measure how children with disabilities perform in school. We therefore applaud UNICEF for this important initiative, particularly for collecting the data on children with disabilities. I believe it is a first step to give visibility to children with disabilities and the challenges they face, and also in promoting action in Sierra Leone and the region.
Ao longo dos últimos anos, o UNICEF e o Ministério da Educação têm realizado muitas ações para garantir uma educação inclusiva em São Tomé e Príncipe. O país já dispõe de uma estratégia, já dispõe de uma lei quadro para o ensino especial e vem desenvolvendo experiências para o ensino de surdos, cegos e ambliopes.
Em São Tomé e Príncipe, 1 em cada 5 crianças tem necessidades especiais e destas, apenas 47% frequenta a escola. As evidências reportadas no Mix 6, com certeza, irão ajudar a desenvolver políticas consentâneas para uma consolidação da política de inclusão na educação. Assim, o governo de São Tomé e Príncipe compromete-se a usar essas evidências para não deixar nenhuma criança para trás.
Ministry of Education and Training welcomes the global report on children's disabilities as it provides an opportunity to strengthen the planning and the design of programs aimed at making sure that learners with disabilities have access to quality education. The data and recommendations from the global report will help Ministry of Education in making informed decisions regarding establishment of systems for the provision of assistive devices for learning, strengthening the referral and support mechanism, as well as reforming priorities for teacher development programs. I thank you all.
En Cuba, el Sistema Nacional de Educación es un entorno propicio que facilita la inclusión y la protección de los derechos de nuestros niños, niñas y adolescentes con discapacidad. Es un contexto institucional y más allá de esto, es todo un sistema que brinda una oferta de servicios de aprendizaje, educabilidad, de participación y desarrollo de habilidades para la vida, al que tienen acceso todos los niños, niñas y adolescentes de manera universal y gratuita y desde la primera infancia, independientemente de los ingresos familiares o cualquier otra vulnerabilidad que pueda aparecer en los diferentes entornos de relación. El objetivo central de la educación inclusiva en Cuba es la eliminación de la exclusión social. Esto lo hace un proceso que va mucho más allá, que tiene un alcance general y rebasa los límites de cualquier área identificada como educación especial. Se propicia la atención personalizada y la integración escolar a todos los educandos que asisten a nuestras instituciones, independientemente de la modalidad o de la institución escolar que brinda la oferta educativa. Esto marca un espacio, es decir, la inclusión marca un espacio donde todos los niños y niñas, las familias, los docentes y la comunidad, que es muy importante, independientemente de sus condiciones de origen, pueden conseguir altos niveles de desarrollo, tener éxito, ser competentes, aprender dialogando, participar, convivir y sentirse que son una parte importante de su entorno social.
A Guiné-Bissau, no Concerto das Nações, há anos em que se preocupa com o processo de educação, formação e inserção social das pessoas com deficiência. Por isso, nos últimos 10 anos, assiste-se um cenário de grande mudança com a sociedade e a educação como lida com a diversidade humana. E daí devemos estar advertidos e preparados para enfrentar a nova realidade que diz: toda a pessoa tem direito à educação, acesso à educação, toda a pessoa aprende e o processo de aprendizagem é singular para cada uma das pessoas. Dessa feita, as entidades como o UNICEF e o Centro de Excelência de Dados Estatísticos para as Crianças com Deficiência devem continuar os seus apoios para afirmar o processo de educação inclusiva na Guiné-Bissau.
I know the moment that we have all been waiting is here. I know everyone wants to know the findings about this report. And now I would like to welcome Claudia Kappa to present the findings for the global report on children with disability. The largest, we're talking about the largest collection of internationally comparable data on children with disabilities and a significant contribution to help address the needs for data we have been hearing about. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Eunice, for the warm welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to share with you the main findings of this report. But before we go into the data, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all those who contributed to this report. This report is a testament to the efforts of so many people around the world, starting from organizations of persons with disability who have been instrumental in supporting the development of the module that was then integrated into the data, into the different household survey, and led to the production of the data that I'm about to share with you today. I also want to acknowledge the important role played by national statistical offices. And it's exciting to see that today we have so many of them participating in this call. Without their tireless efforts to go and collect the data, we would not be able to be here today. I also want to acknowledge the family and the children who participated in the survey, who decided to share a piece of their life with us, to tell us how children with disability are faring in the world. And obviously, I want to also thank the academic community who joined us in this attempt to develop a core set of questions that can be used worldwide to identify children with disabilities. Now, let's go into the next slide and let's look quickly at what this report is about. Indeed, as Eunice said, this is the largest compilation of data on children with disabilities. It includes comparable data from 42 low and middle income countries. It covers more than 60 indicators of well-being. For the first time, we are able to look at many indicators, including Sustainable Development Goal indicators for children with disability and children without disabilities. And this is an important entry point to understand disparities. We also have global and regional estimates in this report that are based on data from more than 100 countries. Because it is true that indeed the lack of comparable data has been an issue for a long time. But at the same time, many countries across the world have collected data on this population. So we have been able to build on the efforts of over 100 countries in collecting data on children with disabilities. But I want now to focus my attention on the child functioning module, which is this data collection instrument that was developed by UNICEF and the Washington Group on Disability Statistics. I'm excited to see today present in the list of the attendees and also in the panels, members of the Washington Group on Disability Statistics who have played an important role since the creation of the group in fostering harmonization of data collection instrument on persons with disabilities, including children with disabilities. So in the next video, I want to show you what the child functioning module is and how it was developed. Let's play the video.
Children with and without disabilities from around the world. When I grow up, I want to be a pilot.
I want to become a medical doctor.
In the future, I want to be a gymnastics coach. I'd like to become a teacher.
Ambitions and abilities. Every child has them, and every child is entitled to equal opportunity to realize their full potential. So say the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But the hard truth is that millions of children with disabilities are deprived of opportunity. Children with disabilities are among the least likely to get an education, to be employed as adults, to start their own families, and they are among the most likely to live in poverty. Efforts to include these excluded children have been impeded by a shortage of sound data on the lives of children with disabilities and those who care for them.
Animation illustrates the following concepts.
In the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the world's governments call for reliable data that go beyond averages to ensure that no one is left behind. Solid data on which to act and with which to measure progress. Those data are now within reach. In the past, data collection efforts relied on stigmatizing labels and diagnoses. Over the past 5 years, UNICEF and the Washington Group on Disability Statistics have developed a new way of gathering information on child functioning and disability. Mothers or caregivers are asked questions that explore children's actual experiences and the difficulties that they encounter in performing daily activities. The questions can be incorporated into existing data collection efforts. They take into account the fact that children develop and learn at different speeds and that the experience of disability changes as children grow. And they address the need for nationally comparable and internationally harmonized data.
Images of data collection efforts.
Many have contributed to this work in the spirit of partnership, from national governments and statistical offices to disabled persons organizations, researchers, and families. The international community has a shared vision of a just and equitable world, a world in which every girl and boy enjoys the same rights and opportunities, a world where no child is left behind. Building that world will take many hands, but now we have a key with which to unlock the knowledge that makes progress possible and societies inclusive. Let's use it.
List of acknowledgements, including individuals, groups, and organizations. Full list can be found at data.unicef.org. UNICEF logo. Count Me In Initiative logo. To learn more about the Child Functioning module, visit data.unicef.org.
Thank you so much for allowing to play this video. And now let's talk a little bit more about what the Child Functioning module is. And it's really not about the module, it's more about the population that we were trying to capture with this module. And this is what is revolutionary with the Child Functioning module. For the first time, we try to operationalize the concept of disability that is embedded in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the International Classification of Functioning. It's a concept of disability that goes beyond diagnosis, that goes beyond impairment and condition, and really try to capture the difficulties that children might face in their daily life. And these difficulties are not about the impairment that they have. It's about the environment and the interaction between the environment and the impairment. Because in context where there is an accommodating environment, where assistive devices are available to children, where there is no stigma, when there are no barriers, this impairment can actually be accommodated and can reduce the difficulties that children might have. So this is the concept that we've been trying to operationalize. And also we were very concerned about past efforts to collect data on children with disabilities. Why? Because they were focusing on very narrow definitions. They were only trying to capture certain categories and groups of children with disabilities. So we wanted to develop a measure that captured a large concept and a broad definition of disability that encompass different domains of functioning that are important to children and for children. So the module has two components. A part of the module is intended to be used for children below the age of 5 and captures difficulty that young children have in seeing, hearing, walking, understanding and being understood, difficulty with picking up small objects, learning, and difficulty playing. But we also wanted to capture psychosocial difficulties in controlling behavior and emotions. Now, in the next slide, I want to show what we are trying to capture for children older who are between the ages of 5 and the ages of 17. In the case of older children, we are trying to capture children that have difficulty in an even larger set of domains of functioning. Those who have difficulty accepting change in their routine. Those who have difficulty remembering, concentrating, making friends, taking care of themselves, controlling their behavior. Those who have signs of daily anxiety and depression. And of course, these, in addition to children who have difficulty hearing, seeing, learning, and walking. So this is the concept of disability. These are the domains of functioning that are covered through the child functioning module, and that is at the basis of the report we are presenting today. Now, let's go into the next slide, because I wanted to share the findings of this report. First of all, the global number of children with disability in the world. Only 10 years ago, we did not have such a number. There were various estimates that were outside. One of those estimates pointed to 93 million children. Well, we now know through the data that has been collected throughout the world and trying to operationalize this broader concept of disability, that the population of children with disabilities is bigger than we once thought. We are talking about 10% of the world's children, which is the equivalent of nearly 240 million children in the world. And these children deserve to be seen. This number deserves to be celebrated, in that it's the first time that we can finally acknowledge the size of this population and the diversity of children with disability that are included in this population. And this graph shows you the percentage of children with disability in the different regions of the world. The highest proportion of children with disabilities is found in West and Central Africa, where about 15% of the population of children has some form of disability. And obviously, I also want to mention Middle Eastern North Africa with 13%, South Asia with 11%, Eastern and Southern Africa, 10%, Latin America, 10%, North America, 10%, East Asia and the Pacific with 8%, and Europe and Central Asia with 5%. Now, who are these children? What type of functional difficulty are most common? And this is a very important thing to understand, because again, it speaks to the diversity of children with disabilities. So let's look at the next slide. The next slide shows the percentage distribution of young children under the age of 5 by functional difficulty that they have. Now, as we know, the most frequently occurring functional difficulties vary according to the age of the child. However, psychosocial difficulties predominate across all ages. Of all children with functional difficulties below the age of 5, about 37% of them have difficulty controlling their behavior. And another significant proportions have difficulty with learning and communication. These children were overlooked in previous data collection efforts, because previous data collection instruments did not include questions about management of emotions, for instance. So again, this type of data are an important step forward, because we are finally able to recognize, identify, and describe children who have a larger set of functional difficulties. Now, in the next slide, we have a similar chart, in these cases for children between the ages of 5 and the ages of 17. And again, as you can see here from this distribution of children with functional difficulties, 22% of these children have signs of anxiety. 10% have difficulty controlling their behavior. 15% of them have both anxiety and depression. And then you can see all the other various combinations. Let's go now into the next slide, because very often these functional difficulties go hand in hand with signs of anxiety and depression. This is a reminder of the fact that often, because of a number of reasons, including because of the barriers that children with functional difficulties encounter, these barriers might result in additional functional difficulties for them. And this is what these graphs show you. This is the percentage of children between the ages of 5 and the ages of 17 who have signs of anxiety and depression, depending also on other functional difficulties that they have. 32% of children who have difficulty communicating, they also have signs of anxiety and depression. And as you can see, this is a very disturbing pattern and points to the barriers in the environment and the effect that the environment can have on psychosocial well-being of children with functional difficulties across the world. Now let's look into the well-being of these children. And I want to go into the next slide, because this is where we start unpacking the severe deprivation and the barriers that children with disabilities encounter. This graph shows a number of nutrition-related indicators: underweight, stunting, wasting, and show the level of underweight, stunting, and wasting among children without disabilities, children with disabilities, and specifically children with difficulties in more than one domain. And unfortunately, as you can see, these bars are at different height. No child should be underweight, stunted, or wasted. We all know that. But when it comes to children with disabilities, the level of underweight, stunting, and wasting is significantly higher. For instance, if we look at the prevalence of stunting, 30% of children in the countries with available data are stunted. And these are children without disabilities. But the prevalence of stunting increased to 43% for children with disabilities more broadly, and reached over 50% of children with functional difficulty in more than one domain. Again, these clearly point at the barriers and the deprivation that children with disabilities, and particularly those who have difficulty in more than one domain, experience in their life. But nutrition is not the only domain where children with disabilities are left behind. And this is what I want to show in the next slide. This slide represents the percentage of children who receive early stimulation and responsive care by caregivers at home. Early stimulation and responsive care is fundamental to child development. It's fundamental for cognitive development. It's fundamental for the bonding and emotional well-being of children in the relationship with their caregivers. So among children without disability, we have 47% of them who regularly engage in early stimulation and care with their caregivers at home. If you ask me, this number is still too low. Every child should have a nurturing and caring relationship and nurturing and caring caregivers around them. So this number should be 100%. It's 47%. So not all children without disability receive early stimulation and care that they need. But in the case of children with disabilities, these bars are even lower. The proportion of children with disability who receive early stimulation and care at home is 34%. And in the case of children with multiple disabilities, it goes down to 29%. And also there is variation depending on the type of functional difficulty children have. Children with difficulty learning, communicating, and play, they are the least likely to receive early stimulation and responsive care at home. And they are those who need it the most. So these data are very upsetting because clearly show that children overall, they do not receive what they need the most, and children with functional difficulties and disability, they even more likely not to receive this foundation in their development. Now, let's look into the next slide. And this is a summary slide on the proportion of children who are out of school, out of primary education, out of lower secondary education, out of upper secondary education. And these different bars that are displayed on this chart represent children without disabilities, children with disabilities, and then specifically children with more than one disability, children with anxiety or depression only, and children with more than one severe functional difficulties. And as you can see, the bar heights are very different. And I want to take the example of lower secondary school. 16% of children without disability are out of lower secondary school. 16%. In the case of children who have severe forms of functional difficulties, not including anxiety and depression symptoms, this proportion is 36%, almost 2.5 times more likely to be out of school. And the same can be seen for primary school and upper secondary school. And the data in the report also show whether children with disability are able to progress in the school system, whether they are able to learn, for instance. And the story that the data tells is unfortunately very consistent. Children with disabilities are less likely to access school, and when they are in school, they are less likely to progress through the school grades, to complete an education, and to be able to learn because of the school environment. Let's go into the next slide. Deprivation happens in the school system, but continue to happen at home as well. And this graph shows the percentage of children aged 7 to 14 who are read books at home, who have books at home that they are able to read. And again, as we all know very well, school has a key role to play, but it's also important that children receive support for learning at home. These graphs show you that among children without disabilities, and these are displayed here in the gray bar, 62% of them are read at home. They have access to books and they are reading. But when it comes to children with disabilities, this proportion unfortunately decreased dramatically to 48%. And depending on the type of functional difficulty they have, these levels are even lower. Among children with difficulty communicating, only 22%, compared to 62% among children without disabilities, only 22% of them read books or are read books by the parents at home. So as you can clearly see, these type of difficulties are compounded by what happened in the school system, but also, unfortunately, what happens at home. There is so much in that report. The report is about 200 pages of data. So I really encourage you to access the report, to be able to read and take the time to reflect on what this data means and how can we ensure that all children, including children with disability, have the opportunity to enjoy equal rights. Thank you so much, Eunice, and I'll give you back the floor.
Wow, thank you very much, Claudia. What a report. I am definitely sure everyone is just excited, as I am, because of those findings. And now this report was made possible and thanks to the many partners who worked hard to collect the necessary data. We couldn't do it alone. Thank you very much to everyone who had input in the data. So now let's hear what some of them have to say.
My name is Bo Peterson with the Multiple Indicator Cluster Service Program, in short, the MIX program. First, congratulations on the report launch. It is with great pride that we have contributed to this wealth of new data. It's been about 5 years since we included the child functioning module in MIX, and as of today, more than 60 completed or planned surveys have included the module. And more is coming, of course. We support many new surveys, both in new countries and in countries returning for another mix. I think this number is a great testament to the commitment of countries seeking to fill a long-standing data gap. We are very happy to have the module as part of the MIX standard questionnaires. The value of the long and hard work in developing the module shines through and can be a lesson to other similar efforts. It is really not that easy to ask the right questions. Here, we were presented with an extremely well-tested methodology, which in return has made the MIX programs work a lot easier. Thank you. We wish you the best on the work of the Center of Excellence.
As Government Statistician for Tonga, I am happy to be part of this global UNICEF event on releasing a global report on children with disability. I understand that these new initiatives, which covers more than 70 indicators on child well-being, aim to allow children with disability to be more visible, reflecting their situation socially, economically, and politically. It is our hope that such new initiatives can be used to further promote evidence-based decision-making here in Tonga for children with disability, hence providing new policies and interventions for these marginalized groups. I am interested in standardizing of approach to data production and dissemination, and further to the coordination of data activities within our national statistical system here in Tonga, particularly data on children with disability.
I would like to remind us all, in case you have a question, kindly there is a chat box. Make sure you write your question on the question and answer box. So the increased availability of data on children with disabilities is one of the motivating factors behind the creation of the Center of Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities that we are launching today. I know everyone is wondering, what does Center of Excellence mean? But let's find out what this center is all about. And here is a video message introducing the center.
All too often, children with disabilities are left behind. In the absence of data, these children remain invisible. They are forgotten politically, increasingly marginalized, and vulnerable to rights violations. Recently, a focus on children with disabilities has led to new data collection efforts. We have seen a dramatic increase in the volume and quality of data available, but more is needed. That's why UNICEF is launching the Center of Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities. The center promotes the development of inclusive methodologies for data collection. It encourages data analysis and their use to support advocacy and policy change. The center's core values are innovation, inclusivity, and partnership. Now that the Center of Excellence has been launched, it can begin its work. When used strategically, data has the power to transform lives. And for many children with disabilities, this could be a game changer.
Now that the Center of Excellence has been introduced, we are excited to present some of its initiatives. And I am pleased to introduce Elizabeth Lockwood from CBM Global Disability Inclusion and the International Disability and Development Consortium, who will share the icon contest of the center. welcome, Madam Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you everybody for being here today to launch the Global Report and the Center of Excellence. When the Center of Excellence was first established, it reached out to children and youth with disabilities to seek their input on ideas for what icon representing the center could be through a submission of drawings. The center has received several drawings, and a graphic designer has helped to transform these into icons, which you can see on the slide in front of you. We have 5 options for icons based on these drawings submitted by children, and I'm very excited to invite all of you today to assist us in selecting the icon which best can represent the Center of Excellence. So please follow the Menti poll in the chat box and select the icon that you think best fits the vision of the center. So it should be in the chat box. So please vote. And it looks like you're voting. Very nice. It looks like design number 2 is leading by quite a bit, but there's a little competition. That looks very, very good. So thank you so much for voting so quickly and well. And we look forward to finalizing these votes and the new icon, and we will share it with you all very soon. And now I would like to introduce Julie Weeks from the National Center for Health Statistics and the Washington Group on Disability Statistics to introduce one of the center's first initiatives. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that introduction and for sharing the icon test. We look forward to the results of that. As one of its first initiatives, the Center of Excellence is funding projects focusing on children with disabilities and data analysis, data visualization, and capacity building. These projects have been opened to submissions globally and are designed to facilitate an increase in analysis of existing data and support data producers and users in new areas focusing on children with disabilities. While the final selection of projects has not yet been made, I'm excited to share today some of the proposals that we have received thus far. We have received 8 proposals for data analysis projects from 6 different countries, from PhD candidates and researchers at universities and research institutions. We have received a diversity of proposals, including proposals to analyze specific factors that contribute to anxiety and depression in children, as well as the impact that caste, gender, and disability have on children's educational attainment. We have received 3 proposals for data visualization projects from 3 different countries, from analysts with data science and biostatistics backgrounds, as well as those in non-governmental organizations. The projects have focused on the creation of data dashboards, allowing users to interact with data on children with disabilities, as well as the visualization of educational data for children with disabilities. Last, but certainly not least, we have received 21 proposals for capacity building projects from 9 different countries, from healthcare providers, non-governmental organizations, organizations of persons with disabilities, the private sector, and university and research institutions. These projects are many and diverse as well, with one focusing on training healthcare workers to utilize a mobile data collection tool to collect disability data, and another proposing the creation of a toolkit for inclusive early childhood education. While the final selection of proposals has not yet been made, There are a diverse range of proposals and interests in expanding the work surrounding data for children with disabilities. In light of these many innovative projects, we would like to invite you, all attendees, to share what they consider to be the most significant knowledge gaps in data for children with disabilities. Please follow the link in the chat box to the Menti poll and share your thoughts on the most pressing knowledge gaps on children with disabilities. This poll will remain open throughout the remainder of the webinar. Thank you so much for your feedback. We'll be taking all of your suggestions under consideration when planning future center projects and activities. And thank you for your time and feedback on the knowledge gaps surrounding data for children. We look forward to announcing the winners of the calls for proposals soon.
Thank you to Julie for introducing the calls for proposals from the center. It sounds like something, some interesting work will be forthcoming. Thank you very much for introducing such. So now, before we dive into our panel discussion, I would like to take a look at some of the responses you have all shared with us in the first Menti poll on what the main barriers to the availability and quality of data on children with disabilities. All right. Thank you very much. So to help us think through the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead in our shared efforts to produce inclusive data and build inclusive societies, we have invited 4 distinguished panelists. And today we are joined by Ashura Michael, a human rights, disability, and gender youth advocate, Juan Ignacio Perez Bello from the Secretariat of the International Disability Alliance, Jennifer Madans, Chair of the Washington Group on Disability Statistics, and Dominic Aslam, Chair of the International Disability and Development Consortium. Many thanks to all the panelists for joining us today. So we are heading to the panel discussion. And my first question will go to Ashura Michael. So Ashura, what is the role that children and youth with disabilities can play in strengthening the availability and equality of data on their lives? Ashura. All right, so as we await for Madam Ashura, my next question will go to Joanne. Joanne Perez Bello, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly, from the International Disability Alliance, is a leader advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities. So tell me, what data are needed to effectively support advocacy efforts and ensure that the rights of children with disabilities are met?
Thank you very much for the introduction and the question. Let me begin by thanking the organizers of this event for this opportunity and by congratulating UNICEF for the launch of its global report on children with disabilities and for the initiative of the Center of Excellence on Data for Children with Disabilities. Of course, there are many areas of policies and rights on which data on children with disabilities is still as lacking and or inaccurate as urgently required for CAPD implementation. In that sense, any selection runs the risk of being considered a little bit unfair or not mindful of pressing needs at specific national contexts. That acknowledged, I would like to highlight here 4 areas in which better data would contribute to advanced conversations and establish baselines from which to assess progress in the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Firstly, children with disabilities are right holders whose voice should find channels for expression and respectful and serious consideration. In this sense, indicators to assess the level of participation of children with disabilities in existing fora and procedures for decision-making and the exercise of the right to be heard should be explored, as was done by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights through its CRPD Human Rights Indicators 7.27 and 7.28 developed by the project Bridging the Gap 1. Secondly, we need states in many regions to have more, better, and comparable data on children with disabilities placed in any form of non-family-based alternative care, including residential institutions and even small-scale group homes, including on where they have living parents and relatives. As you know, Article 23 of the CRPD requires ensuring to children with disabilities the chance to grow up in a family setting. Thus, policy efforts focus on supporting families of children with disabilities and on developing and enhancing foster families and adoption schemes are needed, and for this we need more clarity on the extent and characteristics of the problem. Thirdly, education data must be improved. The CAPD calls for inclusive education systems in which all students attend regular classes. At this point of time, it's a little bit difficult to accept that data available on many states still do not reflect properly children with disabilities out of school and whether students with disabilities attend mainstream education or special education, which unfortunately still exists. Like this, it becomes quite difficult to develop any transition plan with the adequate resource reallocation towards inclusive education. In addition, while it might be a little bit complex, data produced on children with disabilities in regular education should also allow for proper qualitative assessment of support systems and services. Finally, to better support families of children with disabilities, more research and data analysis efforts should devote to the issue of estimating disability-related extra costs, both direct and indirect. This is a key concept for social protection under Article 28 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and it requires that more technical guidance is developed for states and that it becomes clearer and more accurate for policy design and resource allocations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Joanne, for sharing your thoughts on the data that is still needed for advocacy purposes. Those are good goals to continue strive for. So my next question is for Jennifer. So Jennifer, the Washington Group on Disability Statistics has been a key actor in driving advancements in methodologies and data collection. So Madam Jennifer, what are the bottlenecks that in your view continue to affect the quality and availability of data on children with disabilities, and what can be done to overcome them? Madam Jennifer.
Thanks for that question, Eunice. And first, speaking on behalf of the Washington Group, I also want to congratulate UNICEF on the release of this very impressive report and on the launch of the Center of Excellence. And Washington Group is also very pleased that this launch is taking place as part of the last day of our 21st annual meeting. The Washington Group and UNICEF have had a very long and productive collaboration, and we look forward to continuing that collaboration to further the work of the center and of our two organizations. So in terms of improving the quality and availability of data on children with disability, I think we just have to acknowledge that this is going to be an ongoing process. And disability statistics are not unique in this. Continuing improvement is to be expected even in the most well-established area of statistics. Much has been accomplished, and the report is evidence of that. But we are still really at the beginning of the process, and much needs to be done. Now, to further the improvement process and to take better advantage of the methodologies that have been developed, we need to learn as much as we can from all of our experiences in implementing the child functioning module. And this is going to require collaboration and sharing of best practices among those who have used the module, as well as data systems that have not yet adopted the new methodologies. We need to learn why they have not adopted these methodologies. And some of these reasons are going to be very broad-based. They tend to be related to technical assistance, to burden, just for the need of more work in terms of the development process. But some are going to be very unique to a particular data collection. And we need to find solutions. And it may be that we need to deal with each of these problems on a country-by-country data collection system as we grow to improve the methodologies. Now, increasing the demand for data will also encourage expand data collection, probably the most important way to expand data collection. And this can be done by showing the usefulness of the data through in-depth and policy and program relevant analyses, many of the ones that Juan Ignacio just described. Now, the report released today, while it's extremely impressive, could only begin to mine the available data. And extensive analyses of these data are needed, and it's very encouraging to see that the Center for Excellence is focused on new analytic opportunities. The added benefit of increased analysis will be in identifying ways to improve data collection itself, and also identifying where gaps are needed, are there. Now, as we take greater advantage of the tools that have been developed, additional tools are needed, and these will provide a more complete picture of children with disability. Now, the child functioning module is designed for household surveys, but schools provide a very unique opportunity for data collection using teachers as respondents. The child functioning module teacher version was developed for this purpose and to provide a mechanism for including the collection of disability data into education management information systems. Routine and standardized data collection through EMSs would produce a wealth of disability data on children on this ongoing basis. Now, plans for testing the CFM teacher version had to be put on hold due to COVID-19, but UNICEF and other partners are restarting their testing activities. And the Washington group has offered to act as a convening body to enhance collaboration of all the tests that have been done, and also to increase the comprehensiveness of these tests and maybe to make them go a little quicker. Then we also need to go beyond information on functioning and do more to obtain information on the school environment. And this is also to advance inclusive education, both in terms of attendance in school, but also in the quality and the appropriateness of the education opportunities that are offered. Now, UNICEF and the Washington group collaborated on the development of an inclusive education module that could be incorporated into surveys and also into education management systems that would identify barriers and facilitators to school attendance and to learning for children with disabilities. The testing of this module has also been impacted by COVID, but work is starting up again. The testing and implementation of data collection tools needs to be supported, both for inclusive education, but also for the testing and implementation of the child functioning module teacher version, the child functioning module itself, and also to support the analysis of available data to improve data quality, availability, and the status of children with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Jennifer, for sharing your experiences in what continues to limit the availability of data on children with disabilities. Those are some concrete action that I hope we can work towards. And a kind reminder to everyone, kindly, if you have a question, we have a question and answer box. Please direct all your questions to that box. So I can see my Ashura Michael is back. And Ashura, what is the role that children and youth with disabilities can play in strengthening the availability and quality of data on their lives? Ashura?
Thank you so much. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, Ashura.
Children with disabilities and youth are very important persons in our society. When we think about education and good health and talk about employment, children and youth with disability play a very big role, which can help us to make a good decision on how to distribute resources that is available both in government and in the UN agencies. Youth and children with disability should be given a priority in education, and if they access education that is available, then they will be able to come out and express themselves and share their life experiences. They'll be involved in campaigns. For example, we have a campaign that is going on that was launched recently, We 15, by Paralympics. So we can come and give out our voice and promote specific roles that we play to get the data. Children with disability play a major role through education. They can do better. Parents of children with disability and private sector should make sure their children are empowered so that they educate the children, because data starts direct from the schools, and children with disabilities will help us get or capture the data. When you talk about employment opportunity, youth are able to create jobs on their own. And we should make sure that our youth are well empowered through empowerment, economic empowerment. There'll be self-reliance, and also they'll be involved in policy making and develop their own countries in different regions. They'll contribute their own to have a good and healthy data. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ashura. We do appreciate. So I would like to invite our final panelist now, Dominic Haslam, to answer one more question before we continue into our discussion. So Dominic, the International Disability and Development Consortium utilizes a wide network of actors to achieve inclusivity for persons with disabilities globally. Tell me, what types of partnerships are needed to ensure that data for children with disabilities are both generated and used to drive policies and programming?
Thank you for the question. And firstly, let me repeat the thanks to UNICEF for holding this event and also the opportunity to speak today. And let me congratulate Claudia and all involved on the launch of this critical report and the Centre of Excellence. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague Elizabeth Lockwood in putting together this response. So IDDC ourselves, we're a broad network of international NGOs, national networks and organizations of persons with disability. For us, the most important and most crucial partnerships we have, excuse me, are with persons with disabilities themselves and their representative organizations. In this instance specifically, we work to ensure that organizations of persons with disabilities, such as the International Disability Alliance and its members, have a meaningful role in data collection, analysis, and its use. Because in the end, this data is only telling us hundreds, thousands, or millions of individual stories and experiences. And these stories belong to each of the 1 billion people with disabilities worldwide. And as Claudia said earlier, in this case, 240 million children. Secondly, growing partnerships with national statistical offices and enumerators to ensure that data on persons with disabilities are being collected systematically and correctly, and that data are not being missed. This has particularly developed in recent years thanks to partnerships with the Washington Group. It's always good to be on a panel with Jennifer, and with the Inclusive Data Charter, which is an initiative of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. Thirdly, supporting individuals and communities to gather citizen-generated data to complement those official data sources and highlight information that cannot be captured in other ways. But as importantly, IDDC and our members have a key role in facilitating partnerships between OPDs, governments, UN entities, the national statistics offices, line ministries, civil society organizations, and communities themselves to ensure evidence-based policymaking and monitoring. So that's to make sure that duty bearers are held to account for the implementation of those policies and for delivery on the legal commitments made under the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but also the promises made within global frameworks such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Inclusive data has been an increasing area of focus over the last 5 years. The increased focus by national statistics offices, the practical experience of many NGOs and OPDs, the other initiatives I've already mentioned have clearly shown that this can be done in any context with the right political will and the right resources. And this report and the work of the Centre is further evidence of that fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic, for your answer and your reflections. And many thanks again to all our panelists for your thoughtful contribution to the challenges and opportunities in the generation and use of data for children with disabilities. Now, we would like to open up the floor for discussion and to answer any questions you may have. And please type your questions in the question and answer box, and we will respond to as many as we can. So kindly, you can do that in the next 1 minute, and we will be able to answer some of your questions.
Eunice, let me come in quickly because I saw so many questions in the chat box. It's overwhelming, and we are trying to have many people answering the question. The questions are very varied. First of all, a group of questions were, what can we do to improve the quality and availability of data? And Jennifer spoke to this point. But I just want to mention, in the report, we describe how we can break this cycle of invisibility in data. Because it is true that as we have made progress, at the same time, there are still some bottlenecks that persist. Some of the, for instance, national statistical offices do not have trained interviewers who are able to administer the questionnaire to persons with disabilities. So when we don't have, for instance, a sign language interpreter, persons with disabilities that are approached for data collection as part of general surveys, for instance, they're not able to participate. And this is just one of the examples of the reality on the ground. So if we want to make data inclusive of persons with disability, we also have to strengthen the capacity within national statistical offices for deploying teams who are able to communicate with the persons with disability. But sometimes the biggest barrier to data collection is stigma. Stigma is important, including the stigma and the discrimination that the interviewers team, for instance, themselves, the staff working to collect data might have. So if we really want to improve data collection, we also have to make sure that not only we collect more data, but the data that we collect is inclusive by using inclusive data collection tools that have broader definitions of disability, and that the teams that use these tools on the ground have the skills, the capacity, and the resources to do so adequately. And this is another reminder about the importance of organizations of persons with disabilities. Data collection is a shared responsibility. An organization of persons with disability have to be at the center of any data collection efforts, because they can help us determine what is really important to collect data on. They can also help us ensure that the approaches that we're following to implement the data collection efforts are consider the needs and the reality of persons with disabilities, but they're also fundamental to make sure that then this data is collected, then it's used. As a data person, there is nothing more frustrating to me to see that when data is collected, then it's not used to promote change. We don't collect data for the sake of collecting data. Data has to be a first step toward promoting change. So many of the comments in the chat box really spoke to the importance of working together to improve the availability, the quality, and the use of data. So we have also a number of other questions, Eunice. Unfortunately, it looks like we might not have time, but I want to reassure everybody that the report is available on UNICEF website. We are going to include the link here. All those who have participated to this webinar, they will receive an email where they will find the report, the PowerPoint presentation, the recording, and other links where they can find useful resources, including the data sets that everybody can look at and use to run their own analysis. These are publicly available data that researcher can also use to conduct additional analysis, and please do use the data. These are public goods for all of us to make use of. Back to you, Eunice.
Thank you all for the discussion. We are not able to answer all your questions, but we are glad you are able to participate in asking the questions. And now it is now 5:37 p.m. here in Kenya. And that brings us to the conclusion of this webinar. We do appreciate, and I would like to thank everyone for your attendance today. It has been a pleasure to celebrate this milestone with you all. As we move forward, let's celebrate, let's remember that promoting inclusion means that we stop erecting new barriers in the physical and communication realm, and that we tear down existing barriers, including attitudes that perpetuate exclusion through stigma and discrimination. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.